Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Colada. Welcome back to another video, and today we're doing another tier list on the Undertale bosses on how hard they actually are. As you can see, we've got 6 categories, so let's just get into it. By the way, for context, I'm not going to go through like each run, because if we do the genocide run, then all of them are literally going to be at the bottom apart from 2. So we're going to do them like the neutral run, the pacifist run, and the genocide run, so let's get into it. Starting off with Metatron Neo. You just one-shot this guy. That's literally it. There's nothing more you can really say about this guy. You one-shot him, that's literally it. Up next, we got Toriel, and Toriel is a bit of an interesting one because you can die to her, but again, it doesn't matter if you're doing the genocide run or the pacifist run, she is still extremely easy to kill. Again, of course, with the genocide run, you kill her one shot, but if you're doing the pacifist run, you can easily not die by her, let's just say. Like, she's not a hard boss to beat. She's really easy, mainly because like she doesn't really want to kill you, but she can kill you either way. Up next on the next row, we have Papyrus. This is a bit of an interesting one because Papyrus can be a bit awkward sometimes, I will admit. For example, I do find myself in a situation where I can actually do die to him. By the way, like every single run I do on Pacifist, I do actually die by him. No matter how many runs I've done before in Undertale, I always somehow die by him at least once or twice. And that's why he's on very easy because, again, really easy to kill, but sometimes it can be a bit awkward in those stages when the bones keep going through. Apart from that, he's just a really easy boss, really. There's not really much to say about him. You can die, like I said before, but again, he isn't really that hard. And again, for the genocide route, you can one-shot him, but I'm not really going to be talking about the genocide route for each character because, again, they either just hide, they're not there, or you just kill them in one whole go. Up next is the dummy, and I will admit, for a newer player, you will struggle on this, but for me, I find it quite easy to beat. I do admit, sometimes it can be a bit awkward, and there are many times where I actually have died by this character, especially during the pacifist run. But again, this character isn't really that hard, and sometimes you can first try this character if you're lucky, and sometimes I have been doing that, and I'm surprised. Maybe I could have put him a bit lower, like the same area as Papyrus, but at the same time, he can be a bit of a struggle sometimes. Up next is Undying, and this one's a bit weird, because sometimes she can be really hard to beat, and I will admit, I do have a fair share of times of how many times I do die by her. At the same time, it's a bit weird with Undying, you know, because sometimes you can easily beat her and then sometimes you will struggle. Especially with those reverse arrows, they can be a pain in the arse sometimes. But altogether though, she isn't really that hard to beat. I never really struggled with her that much, apart from the reverse arrows again. But if you can counter them, she's an extremely easy boss to beat. Pacifist route, she can be a bit of a struggle sometimes, and maybe you could put her up on decently hard. But again, she's a mid-boss. She doesn't really do that much damage to you, and you can easily counter her if you're good enough. Up next is Muppet. I'm pretty sure that's her name. It's a bit of an interesting one, Muppet is, because again, she has her own attack, just like Undying and Sans of Virus and Metatron. Her special attack with her changing your heart purple is a bit of an interesting one, because it isn't hard, but when you get to like the third phase, that's where you might struggle a bit, I would admit. But altogether though, she isn't really that hard of a boss to beat. Sometimes she can be a bit of a pain in the arse, but sometimes she can also be extremely easy to beat. But again, that just depends on how easy you can fight her. Again, for the pacifist run, she can be a bit of a struggle, I will admit, where your majority of the time you are healing. But again, she isn't really that hard to beat at the same time. You might struggle, you might die once or twice. It's a bit the same like with Undying as well. But again, she isn't really that hard as well. Up next is Metatron. Now, Metatron's a bit of a weird one, because I feel like I should have put him in moderate. But at the same time, he could also be really hard to fight. It's a bit of a weird one, because I rarely die to this guy. Like, I can't remember the last time I actually did die to him. Must be about, probably the second time I've even fought him, actually. But he isn't really that hard to fight. Like, he isn't really that hard. He's really easy to counter, and his attacks are very unique. And again, it's just a bit weird, isn't it? Because some people might say that he is hard, some people might say that he is not. In my opinion, it can go either way, dependent on like how good you are at the game. I think I'm pretty good, but sometimes I do struggle with Metatron, even though I don't even die to him. Up next is Azrael. Now here's the thing with Azrael. You could put him at the bottom's level, and the reason why is because you can basically never die by him, and you always have food with you no matter what. But the thing is with Azrael, is that his attack system is very unique and very hard to counter. But at the same time, he also isn't really that hard to fight as well. Some people may struggle, some people may not. I do have my fair share of deaths while fighting Azrael, but at the same time with Azrael, he isn't really that difficult. He can be hard sometimes, I will admit, but even if you do die by him, you're still enjoying yourself because you're still listening to probably one of the best Undertale songs of all time. So again, you really can't argue with this boss. You never really struggle or get angry with this boss, because if you do like push back like 2 places again, and then you fight again, and you're back to where you were again. So if anything, if you don't die by Azrael, you're basically in the clear. It isn't really that hard. But again, you do die quite often by him, especially with the pacifist route, which is the only route you can fight Azrael. But with 20 HP, you do struggle, I will admit. But again, isn't really that hard. Up next is Asgore. Here's the thing with Asgore. Again, another character I don't die to that often. But again, another character that can be extremely hard. It's weird with this row up here, because I feel like they should all go in moderate, but where they place and where they at isn't really that hard to fight, but you can die quite often. The thing is with Asgore and Metatron, I don't really tend dying by them, but they are a difficult character to fight. If you have the pie, the butterscotch pie, you basically have an instant win, really, because his attack lowers and your defense increase. But when you fight, you don't really fight him unless, of course, you are doing the neutral run. But 9 times out of 10, you are just doing the pacifist run when you don't really fight him, you just spare him. Wait, no. Ignore me, by the way. You do fight him. The only way you can spare him is to fight him. But again, an interesting character because he's a badass, and again, another amazing theme. It's weird because this character, again, it's weird this placement is. It's really weird. Like, I can probably put Asgore and Metatron in moderates. But again, their attack system are so unique and so challenging, they deserve to be this high up, if that makes sense. Up next is, I'm pretty sure his real name is Omega Flowery, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm going to just call him Flowery because it's just way easier. So, Flowery can be either really hard or easy to fight. It's weird for me because sometimes I can struggle, but sometimes I can also have a run where I don't die to Flowery. It's weird with this character, and I will admit he is a difficult character to fight, I will admit on that. But at the same time, he can also be quite easy to counter. If you can dodge his attacks like his flamethrower or his bouncy, spiky balls? Things? Whatever they're called? He isn't really that hard to fight. And of course, with an amazing theme song, you don't really tend to die by him. You really don't. Once you've collected all the hearts, and there's also, by the way, each stage where you have a heart, you regain health. And it makes it way more easier to fight Flowery. I don't really tend dying by him that often. I rarely don't. Again, it's another boss where I don't really die that often to, but again, it's another boss where I think is extremely hard. Some people may consider that Flowery is a hard boss to fight. In my personal opinion, yes and no. he can easily be countered, but again, he can easily be defeated at the same time. I don't really have a clear answer if he's hard or not. For newer players, yes, but for me, it's kind of a hit or miss on how easy this character is, and I don't really struggle with this character often, unless I'm going back to Undertale and I haven't played it in like a year or so. Up next is Undying the Undying. Now here is the thing about Undying the Undying. Sometimes you can have a good run where you're like either 1 or 2 hits off for killing her, but sometimes you can struggle so much where you probably want to restart. And I will admit, this character is actually in a category where I think that I do actually struggle with a lot. I have had my fair share of deaths by her. I've died so many times. But if you're good at like rhythm games, I feel like you can easily beat Undying the Undying. She isn't really that hard if you're good at rhythm games, and I'm the type of person who is good at rhythm games. But at the same time, I do struggle with Undying, especially with, you know, those reverse arrows, like I mentioned before with Undying. Undying the Undying has those patterns, and she also has special attacks as well, where you're basically like moving and dodging her spikes or her spears or arrows, whatever they're called. Those ones can be a bit difficult as well. Like those ones, you don't see them by Undying, you only see the arrows, but those ones you do see because of her special attack. Also, they're also extremely hard as well because they go really quick and sometimes they go extremely slow. It can go either way, depending on how quick you are. In my opinion, she isn't like impossible or isn't hard, but I would admit you might have quite a handful of attempts to fight her. I think it took me about like maybe 20 or 30 attempts to beat her, which seems a lot, but in hindsight, it isn't really that hard. Like I said, you can struggle quite a bit, but she isn't really that hard to fight if you know what you're doing and you know the patterns. It's kind of like muscle memory, kinda. And of course, last but not least, Sans. I've fought you once, and I've beaten you. And I tempted you again, and I failed. This character is arguably the bane of my existence. I don't know what words can describe how hard a character is. I could go and say out there that this could possibly be one of the most hardest characters in all of video games to beat. Some may say that, oh, Sans, yeah, I've beaten him a handful of times before. I've beaten him in one whole go. I've beaten him with my eyes closed. I've beaten him with my hands tied behind my back while actually getting pegged by my next door neighbour. I don't. In my opinion, though, I do struggle with this boss. I think a lot of people will, and they always will. I will always struggle with this character no matter what. And if you see my YouTube videos on Undertale, you've seen I've struggled numerous of times by Sans. Some will definitely say that he isn't really that hard. Some may disagree, and some may say that he is definitely one of the most hardest characters out there to beat. I've beaten him before, but I couldn't do it again. I couldn't. I refused and I quit to beat Sans. I'm messing up my words. I'm too tired for this. As I was saying, I do struggle to fight Sans and beat him. I beat him before, I couldn't do it again. It's more about muscle memory because every single time you do it, you're at a stage where, oh yes, I'm getting better. I'm getting way better. I can learn how to do this. And then sometimes you're at a stage where you just want to give up and just move on to the pacifist route, or just play a completely different game. And for those out there who have beaten Sans, congratulations, because I have. Years and years and years and years ago. I would say probably about like 2 years ago, which isn't really that long, but for me it is. Some may, again, like I said, some may, you know, find this boss extremely hard, some may not. But again, So, for example, like, some people could put it as extremely difficult. And some people might say, like, oh, Undying the Undying is way harder than Sans. But definitely Sans, the most memorable video game character probably out there. Unless you're thinking about Minecraft or Fortnite. But apart from that, again, he's not an easy boss to fight. Anyways, a bit of a short video, isn't it? Yeah, there's not really a lot of bosses to go through, really. They're all just really easy to talk about. I feel like some of them I were a bit too harsh on and a bit too generous with. I feel like maybe the dummy could be a bit higher. Maybe Asgore and Metatron could be lower. But at the same time, I feel like this is a perfect tier list of where each character deserves to go. By the way, I didn't do the mini bosses because, like Doggo, for example, or like Lesser Doggo or something like that, because those are mini bosses, not actual bosses. So I wouldn't really consider them as like an actual boss. Like a boss is like you're at a stage of the game where you can actually start fighting a character, like the ending of like Snowden, or the end of the ruins, like where you fight Papyrus and Toriel. Those are like mini game bosses. Mini game bosses, like those are like actual bosses. I think like the lesser dogs throughout Snowden, like the doggos, I wouldn't really consider them as like a proper boss, but more of like a mini side boss, if that makes sense. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, and if you do agree, then consider subscribing because it helps a massive ton. I'll see you all in the next video. Don't know what it's going to be about. Maybe another tier list, but you never know. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!